purpose of our panel today is to talk about something that the city has been challenged with and working on for the last couple of years, and the impacts of that and what it means to the business community. And that's about the opportunity that we've had to learn about the challenge of economic opportunity in the Charlotte area. And so we're going to spend some time today talking with these folks who are impacting it every single day to talk about what's going on and where we are in the process. So let me make some introductions if I can. To my right are James Ford. James is an educational consultant and co-chair of the Leading on Opportunity Council. And he's joined by Andrea Smith, who's the Chief Administrative Officer for Bank of America, and also the other co-chair of the Leading on Opportunity Council. And we'll talk a moment about the Opportunity Council, but it came out of the Opportunity Task Force work that has taken place over the last several years around the challenge of Charlotte being number 50 out of 50 of places in America to be born in poverty and your chance to get out. So work to do as that impacts our economic situation. On our left, in the middle, is Dina Diorio, who all of you know is our county manager and most recently the expert in Bitcoin challenges around the world, and has done an absolute job in taking care of that. Also, we have Clayton Wilcox, the superintendent of CharlotteMecklenburg Schools, and honored to have Chief Kerr Putney with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. So as we start today in the panel conversations and all, this is a question for all on the panel. And Andrea and James, I'll actually start with the two of you. With the announcement of our number 50 of 50 and the opportunity of where we need to go, what in your mind is one of the most important things that as a community we can do to impact that ranking?
So I think one of the first things, I guess we should back up and give a little bit of history. We've already embarked on one of the best or most important things, and that is truth-telling, right? So investigating what's behind that ranking. I think that ranking surprised a lot of people. When you think about cities that lack opportunity, the first one that comes to mind is just not Charlotte, I think, if we're being honest. And so investigating what's behind that, figuring out what are the systems and the structures that are at work that constrain opportunities for people. But then furthermore, after the production of the report, being intentional about implementing programs, policies, and putting people and amplifying the voices of folks who are already doing incredibly important work becomes, I think, job one. I think that's our task as leaders of the Opportunity Council. That's to go out and see folks that are already having programs or policies that are in place that people don't necessarily know about, that are, in fact, impacting economic mobility. And then on top of that, it's helping to push courageously for conversations of things that impact some of those factors, those three determinants and cross-cutting factors you saw in the report.
So to James's point and to what Kendall mentioned, I think to back up a little bit, James and I became co-chairs in April after the result of 2 years of work led by Dee Odell and Dr. Ophelia Garman-Brown. And the report that they produced, I think, is one that has now provided a common framework for conversation with our entire community, which has been a really important piece of work. Embedded in the report were 21 strategies, 91 recommendations, and 100 tactics, all of which are just a starting point. And so what we've been doing since April is really putting together a council that is representative of all the voices in the community, doing something very different than we've done in Charlotte. We've not taken a top-down approach. We are taking a horizontal approach, if you will, because the most important thing that I think we would all say is getting every voice at the table to be part of what we end up doing. So we're doing it together and with our community, not to the community. And that's what we've been spending a lot of time working on, Kendall.
Thank you. Chief, what in your mind?
First of all, wow, this is a distinguished panel, so I'm trying not to embarrass the rest of my peers up here today. What comes to mind is one word: giving people opportunity. What struck me is I was talking to some of our people who do our community engagement work, and I said, what if we really wanted to truly make a difference in young people who've had that first brush with the law? What if we wanted to show them what Charlotte's really about? They termed it the Envision Academy. They wanted to have kids envision a better, brighter future. And a lot of that, let's be honest, James and I were talking earlier today, and we talked over breakfast a few months ago, comes down to economics, giving them an opportunity. So I talked to a couple of people that I met. First of all, I'm up here because of my price. I come free. I talk for free. Actually, it's embedded in your taxes, but we'll talk about that later. And I met Ms. Smith, and I met, like my uncle, Hugh McCall. We were talking about that same vision, and they took a little bit of action that they put behind their words, and off we go. We introduced him to, and we told him to envision business, government, we even had arts, and we basically opened the doors so they could experience it throughout Charlotte, and it was phenomenal. But make no mistake, the beauty of it is we empowered them economically. They made $1,400 for the summer. It was an 8-week program. That's awesome. They did homework like I've never seen. They were totally engaged. And I think those are the seeds that we need to continue to plant, especially with our young people. This is 15 to 18. And the future of Charlotte, I can't wait until we get assessed again. Because if we do this right, as James was saying, if we have these conversations and follow that up with action, I can't wait to see how far we can climb.
Dina?
So I think when you look at the Opportunity Task Force report and you look at, they have 3 strategies, early childhood education, college and career readiness, child and family stability. Those are things that I think people can sort of wrap their heads around. It makes sense. They know how to go ahead and move forward with that. But when you look at the cross-cutting factors, segregation and social capital, those are not so clear-cut. And I think for this community to be successful, it's going to take the entire community. And people are going to have to potentially put themselves out. They're going to have to put themselves in situations that traditionally they may not be comfortable doing. And I think that's what's really going to impact this work over the long term. We can't continue business as usual and continue to do everything we've been doing every day for the last 40 years and expect a different outcome. So I think if we really are committed to doing this work, it's going to take the entire community willing to do things differently than we've done them before.
Thank you.
And I think foundationally, at the heart of all of this work is an educated community. I think when you look at many of the cross-cutting factors, it's because people weren't well educated. When you take a look at the heart of the work going forward, education is at the heart of it. So, that kind of underpins my service to the Opportunity Council.
Thank you. As we think through the opportunities as we go forward, there's so much opportunity that the business community has to be part of. And so as we think through kind of where we're heading, and I kind of come back to Andrea and James, the task force, we found the issues around economic mobility, the challenges. The council is now beginning. Can you kind of walk us through what the work of the council will be and what business can do to make sure that we're successful in that process?
Sure. So there's been primarily 2 phases of work, much of which Andrew already laid out for you. The first phase, which we caught some flack for, but it was deliberate. We understand that, our timeline, there are going to be some time delays in this. And I was talking to somebody earlier. Our economic situation is not one that we got into overnight. This is a several years and decades long problem. And so we want to be very methodical about naming people on the council that we thought were truly representative. And so that was a very long, deliberate process. And that kind of constituted the first phase of the work. The second phase is identifying and hiring an ED whose job it will be to work day in and day out, actually implementing all the recommendations and strategies. And very excited that I said we'll be announcing who that is in short order. And that person will be responsible for hiring staff who will serve on what is kind of a backbone organization whose job will be to build coalitions amongst all of the various sectors that are represented in that report, because, it's not like we're focusing on one thing like literacy or some other effort. This is an entire system sort of approach. And so that second phase of work is really where we're focusing right now. And also the building of working teams. All of the determinants that you see and the factors that are impact economic mobility are wide-ranging and are going to require deliberate and intentional community engagement. And so developing working teams around those determinants, and some that aren't determinants but kind of may require sort of working groups independent of that, that's going to be our next phase of work going into 2018. We want to make sure that folks have the opportunity to take ownership over this work, because the consensus we've received from the community is that nothing that is about us, without us, is for us. And so we want to make sure that we are including folks at the table and that they're allowed to take ownership.
So while we've been forming the council and looking for the ED, as James described, we didn't want to let work not happen. So We have been organizing meetings. We've been out in the community. We have hired contractors to help lead different work streams, but we didn't want to do anything that the ED couldn't put their own mark on. So we've got a housing work stream. We've got a data work stream. We feel very passionately that we've got to understand our starting point around all of these issues, so that when we look back to see what were the short-term things we did, the medium-term things, and the quite frankly, the generational things that will take 30 years, we need to know where we started and where we're going and how to measure that in between. So that's something that we've spent a fair bit of time on. I think, Kendall, to the point about what the business community can do and is doing, it's getting involved. It's looking at how you're recruiting people. It's looking at where you're recruiting people. It's looking at, do people actually need a 4-year degree to do a job, or can they come out with a high school certificate, and I know Clayton will talk more about that, or can they get a 2-year vocational degree? What's your salary that you're paying people as an hourly rate? How can we make wages more livable for our community? How can you get involved with schools and ensure that the schools know what skill sets you're hiring, whether that's Clayton or Candy Diedemeyer or Phil Dubois or any of the amazing schools that we have around here. So there's a whole lot that the business community can be doing to help drive this. And the last point I would make is James and I and our council are not the ones that are going to be doing all the work. That's going to be everyone in here in the community. We've got great work going on with a lot of our nonprofit partners that we've met with many of them. And what we're trying to do is aggregate, amplify, and accelerate the work going on, and figuring out what we need to do to scale some of this amazing work so that it can have the reach and the impact that we know it could.
Thank you. Chief, as we think about the public safety challenges that we have and what you see every day going on in our streets, and you mentioned opportunity a moment ago, what does your team, what does the support of your organization need to look like from the business community in our belief and confidence in what we're doing?
Sure. Mainly, we need to make sure we're sharing those opportunities, as I said before, and some of it is social capital. I had access to people that actually, let's be honest, Andrea works at the bank, so they could stroke a check. And Mr. McCall has a little bit of money, too, that he could slide our way to make it happen. But ultimately, what I think is the business sector collaborating with nonprofits and other organizations is what it's going to take. And what I've seen is when we come together, we can do virtually anything we set our minds to. But right now it is, and I think the beauty of this 50 out of 50 is it embarrassed us. It made us want to move. And now we just got to collaborate about what that movement looks like. I don't think we have to reinvent the wheel. We don't need to be all things to all people. We can stay on our lane and still collaboratively have that impact. So funding goes to the right people who build that skill set. What we're saying is if you could help financially, educationally, and support that family, we're having the outcomes and the opportunities that Charlotte allows for everybody else. But right now what we see is there continues to be that segment that doesn't get that opportunity, doesn't get that access, doesn't have that contact, and we're trying to break down those barriers as a collaborative group to get that outcome of scaling that ladder of economic opportunity.
Chief, thank you. Dina, as you looked at the county budget this year with the work that had come out of the task force, you made some adjustments and changes around that. And one of those has been around the focus on early childhood education and what we can do from a budgeting and emphasis standpoint. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure. Early childhood education is incredibly important, really, for two reasons. One, if you're a working parent, you really need to have a place to put your child, and I think that's something that all families face, is where am I going to put my child when I have to go to work? And the other thing we know about early childhood education is that the data is very clear. Kids that have access to a quality early childhood education are more likely to graduate high school, they're more likely to go to college, they're more likely to earn more over their lifetime, and they're less likely to become in contact with the criminal justice system. So the return on investment is incredibly clear, and the county really started working on this before the task force completed its report. The Board of County Commissioners adopted a resolution expressing their support for universal access to early childhood education in Mecklenburg County. And so we really started really from that premise. We were successful in getting a grant from the Charlotte Executive Leadership Council to help us fund the first phase of our work, which is a sort of the design phase of what universal pre-K would look like in this community. And one of the things that was really compelling is that we did some polling as part of that work, and what we discovered is that over 90% of the people in Mecklenburg County support universal access to early childhood education in this community. In addition to that, over 70% of people said that they would pay more taxes in order to pay for it. So that's very, very compelling. And so what we did to try to sort of jumpstart the work is in our budget this year, the Board of County Commissioners appropriated additional $6 million to help clear the child care subsidy waiting list, which actually funded child care for 824 kids. It cleared the waiting list for all the 4 and 5 year olds that were waiting for subsidy. So we think that was very, very, thank you. I know, it's exciting. But in addition to that, we also worked very closely with our legislative delegation in the General Assembly, who actually appropriated additional dollars for additional NC pre-K slots. And we got about 200 additional slots here in Mecklenburg County. So in this year alone, with just the work that we've been doing, we were able to provide an experience for over 1,000 kids in this community that wasn't there before. And so we have a lot of more work to do, but we really feel good about the progress that we've made this far. We're really looking for the business community to help us support the initiative and really try to help move it forward over the next year.
Thank you. Superintendent, on Election Day, you got 922 million reasons to get excited about where we're headed in our community. And our chamber was part of the campaign to help talk about the vote and the importance of it. Can you tell us the impact that that can have and how that begins work on the priorities of what's happening at Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools?
Well, certainly. First, I should begin by saying thank you to each of you in this room for either your support of or for your willingness to at least hear why the school system needed this $922 million. Number one, this is going to create great spaces for kids, spaces that young people can embrace the future in. It's going to reduce overcrowding in many of our schools. It's going to give us the opportunity to have spaces that are worthy of our young people. And you know, one of the things that I've talked a little bit about since I've been here to Charlotte is, yes, we do have achievement gaps, and we're working hard every day to close those gaps. But really what we have is an inspiration gap. We have so many young people who don't have a sense of what's possible. They've never sat in a room like this with people like you. They've never had the opportunity to see what the world of work looks like and the fruits that it bears. And so, you know, I will tell you that the construction dollars are a great start, and we're going to work with our communities to build facilities that are worthy of the communities. And quite frankly, if we do this well, when we sit down to build a new school, we'll talk to the community, and maybe we'll be able to raise up the entire community, not just a school. Maybe we'll be able to improve properties around it. Maybe we'll be able to build it in concert with the YMCA, libraries, and other services that communities need to be successful. But after all of that is done, what we need is the intellectual capital that's in this room. We need people here who will serve as role models for kids, who will talk to kids about the power of industry, who will talk to kids about entrepreneurship. And if we have those things, I think we're a long ways down the road to making a much better Charlotte and a much better Mecklenburg County.
Agreed, and thank you. So as we close out this end of the panel conversation, and Clayton, I'll come back to you. What's kind of one final thought that you want to make sure that everybody here knows that we need to do to help move Charlotte forward in this area of opportunity for all?
I think you have to be engaged. I think you can't assume that somebody else will do this hard work. It doesn't mean that you have to be sitting on a stage like this. It simply means that you have to be the change that you want to see in the place that you occupy. So if that's in your boardroom, or if that's on the work floor, if that's in your church community, if that's somewhere down the road, if you are the change that you want to see, I think we're on our way. No one can sit on the sideline if we really want to change these statistics and again make Charlotte and Mecklenburg County the communities that we want.
I was really going to agree with Clayton in what he said. I think everybody's got to walk the walk, not just talk the talk, and everybody has to be part of the solution if we're really going to move this forward.
It's always good to go after smart people. I think two things really. Put our energy and some of our finances behind what works. Making sure people have those opportunities and that access that you heard everybody talk about. And it's got to be personal. I wish it were somebody else's work to do, and it's not. Regardless of title, regardless of your field, you can share a little bit of social capital to get one person who otherwise would not be at the table to see what the benefits and the opportunities that exist here in this city are. If you give that opportunity, I can assure you that's how we build the momentum that's going to change these outcomes.
Thank you.
Agree with everything that Clayton, Dina, and the chief said. I think also read the report. If you haven't read the report, you can go online and read the report and find where you want to get engaged, like everyone was saying, and figure out what social capital you have to offer. Everyone's got it. And we need our entire community to be engaged, and I'm confident that we are going to make a lot of progress if we do that.
I would echo the sentiments of my esteemed colleagues. And the only thing I would add would be two things. One is apply systems thinking to these problems. This is really about systems. And David Stroh, the author, says that every system is designed to achieve whatever it's achieving. And so we have to ask ourselves, what is our role within the system? And the hardest part is figuring out, once we know what our role is, being a part of the solution. Can't be a part of the solution unless you know what the problem is and how you're rolling that problem. And lastly, just the equity lens. Equity is not about equality, everybody getting the same thing. It's about people getting what they need. And we clearly have people along the whole spectrum of need, and they need us right now to step up to the plate. And so that's what I would say.
Well, thank you. And what I would like to say to all of you is we are working in the chamber around a concept of connect, innovate, and grow. And what we want to make sure that we're doing is we're providing opportunities for all to be part of that. And the folks on the panel today have talked about issues and challenges that they have. But let me be a little more direct. It's not a they problem. It's a we problem. We are they and must get involved and engaged. So the challenge that we have at the chamber, where this year's slogan is all in for Charlotte, to make a difference for what's going to happen, and for us to each individually look in the mirror and decide what we can do to make this the greatest city to live in. Because if you're going to live in it, why wouldn't you make it the greatest city to be part of? And we need your action. And action means getting in the game. And it means looking and finding ways to be engaged and involved. The Chamber has many ways to do that, including a new app that now has a volunteer option that you can go online and connected with Hands on Charlotte, determine the thousands of hours and time and need that our non-for-profits have. Chief Putney said it perfectly. It's a combined effort. It's government, it's business, and it's non-for-profits. But without the business community, we will not have the success that we need. So today I ask and I challenge you to be part of that process and help us make this the best community in America to do business and live in. And at this point, please thank our panelists for their time. Thank you. One more thing.